Hello, viewers. Welcome to the first episode of the series titled Important Questions on English Literature. In this series, I am going to give you quite a number of important questions that have been asked in different competitive exams on English literature like UGC NET, sets conducted by different state governments, research conducted by different universities, and all other competitive exams on English literature. So, here we have our first question. In which year was Samuel Johnson's Dictionary of the English Language published? One who compiles a dictionary is known as a lexicographer, and the dictionary itself is known as the lexicon. As far as the English language is concerned, the first person to have written a dictionary in the English language was Dr. Samuel Johnson. He published his dictionary titled Dictionary of the English Language, and this incidentally was the first dictionary that we have in English language. And the question seeks to know in which year it was published. And the answer to this question is it was published in the year 1755. The Dictionary of the English Language, which was first dictionary to have been written in English, was published in the year 1755. Dr. Samuel Johnson was a poet, dramatist, lexicographer, critic, so many things rolled into one. He was known as the literary dictator. Our next question. Which university wit did not have a university background? University wits, as you might be knowing, were a group of poets. Christopher Marlowe, Thompson, Lilly, Green, Nash, Peel, Lodge, all these were members. And these poets were rivals to Shakespeare. One of these people did not have any university background, and we have to name him. And the answer to this question is Thomas Kidd. Thomas Kidd, though he is included in the university wits, did not attend either Oxford or Cambridge. The other university wits either had their education in Oxford or in Cambridge. Thomas Kidd was the only one who did not have any university education but still was included in the university wits. Thomas Kidd was very important. It was he who gave a shape to English tragedy. And Shakespeare's Hamlet is based on his Spanish tragedy. Our next question. Here lies one whose name was writ in waters. Whom does the he in this line refer to? There was an English poet who wanted these lines to be inscribed on his grave or tombstone. Epitaph, we call it epitaph. The lines written on one's grave or tombstone are known as epitaph. And this particular poet wanted these lines. Here lies one whose name was written in waters to be written on his grave after his death. And we have to identify which English poet wanted these lines to be written on his gravestone or tombstone. And the answer to this question is John Keats. John Keats, as you might have known, died at a very young age. He died at the age of 26. He was suffering from consumption, which is known as TB these days. He was very weak, and his brother Tom had died of consumption. And this man, John Keats, was in love with a lady called Fanny Brown, and his love was jilted. That was, his love was not reciprocated. So, all these things were taxing on him, and he paid the price. He died at a young age. Next question. What does an epistolary novel mean? Novels are given different names based on the theme, that is storyline, or based on the form, the technique that is used to write that particular novel. The question relates to a kind of novel called epistolary novel. We have to identify what is meant by an epistolary novel. A very important question. It is asked in several competitive exams. Likewise, it might be asked even in an interview when you attend one. So you have to have knowledge regarding different types of novels. And the answer to this question is a novel that is conveyed in the form of letters. Epistle. Epistle means a letter. So, a novel that is written in the form of letters is known as epistolary novel. Here, what we have is a series of novels written from one character to another. After reading all these letters, we form some kind of story in our minds. The best example that can be given for this kind of novel is Richardson's Pamela. Richardson's Pamela is an epistolary novel. Here is our next question. What is meant by incunabula? A new term. You have to have meanings or understanding of the concepts like incunabula. Almost all these questions are very important. They have been asked in different competitive exams, and there is likelihood of these questions being asked again in exams like UGC NET, AP SET, and all other exams that you might be taking. I can easily understand that you might never have come across a word called incunabula, but it's a very important word, and we are going to have a look at its meaning in a few seconds. Okay, by incunabula we mean books published prior to the advent of the printing press in England. The credit for introducing the printing press in England goes to a person called William Caxton. William Caxton introduced the modern printing press in England in the year 1476. So, printing press came to England in the year 1476, and it took some time to go to different places. As a result, all the books published prior to 1500 AD are known as incunabula. Our next question. Who created the popular character called James Bond? We are all familiar with the character of James Bond and the famous catchphrase, I am Bond, James Bond. But we are not aware of the person who created this particular character? And the answer to this question is Washington Irving, a writer, an American called Washington Irving, created the spy character called James Bond. So this is another important question. The character of James Bond was created by Washington Irving. So those who are going to appear for competitive exams like UGC NET and different sets have to have understanding regarding different important characters. You have to have knowledge regarding a character, the creator, and in which work of art that particular character is found. Next question. The Seasons is a poem by, we have to identify the poet who wrote the poem The Seasons. The Seasons is a very important poem and it was written by, we have to identify the name of the person, the poet who wrote this particular poem. The answer to this question is James Thompson. It was James Thompson who wrote the celebrated poem called The Seasons. There are quite a few important poems, important dramas, important novels whose authorship we have to have knowledge of. Next question here. Which play by Shakespeare was not included in the First Folio of Shakespeare's plays? Shakespeare wrote 37 plays, and these plays were published under the title The First Folio of Shakespeare's Plays by two of his friends, John Hemingway and Henry Condell, in the year 1623. But for reasons best known to themselves, these two people, Hemingway and Condell, excluded one of his plays from the First Folio of Shakespeare's plays published in the year 1623. And we have to identify which particular play of Shakespeare they did not include in that particular folio. And the answer to this question is Pericles or the Prince of Tyre. All other plays were included in the First Folio of Shakespeare's plays published in 1623 by Henry Condell and John Hemingway, except this one, Pericles or the Prince of Tyre. This was not included in the First Folio of Shakespeare's plays. We have to remember the name of this particular play, Pericles or the Prince of Tyre, as having not been included in the First Folio of Shakespeare's plays published in 1623. I am repeating quite a number of times. It is very important. Our next question. The poem The Wasteland is dedicated to. Friends, The Wasteland is known as a modern epic. It is written by T.S. Eliot. It was published in 1922. It created a kind of storm in the literary circles when it came out in the year 1922. Earlier, it had 800 lines. The poem had originally 800 lines, but later on, a friend of T.S. Eliot cut it short to 433 lines. It's a very important poem and it is dedicated to Ezra Pound. T.S. Eliot dedicated his celebrated poem The Wasteland to his friend Ezra Pound. Incidentally, it was Ezra Pound who had blue penciled the poem The Wasteland from the earlier 800 lines to 433 lines that we have in that particular poem today. It's a very important poem. It consists of 5 fragments: the burial of the dead, the game of chess, fire sermon, death by water, what the thunder said. Next question. The phrase stream of consciousness was first used by stream of consciousness. Stream of consciousness today denotes a technique of writing a novel. There are so many different techniques of writing a novel, and stream of consciousness is a very prominent one among them. And this particular phrase, it has come from the arena of psychology, the field of psychology. This phrase, stream of consciousness, was used by a psychologist to denote the continuous flow of thoughts and ideas that come up in a waking mind. If a person is awake, he will be getting quite a number of ideas. A stream of ideas will be crossing his head without any break. And this psychologist employed the phrase stream of consciousness to signify that. Slowly, this particular phrase has come into the realm of English literature. And we have to identify the psychologist who used this first. And it was a psychologist called William James. William James was a famous psychologist, and he happened to be the brother of a famous writer called Henry James. William James wrote a book called Principles of Psychology, and this particular phrase called stream of consciousness was used by William James in his Principles of Psychology to denote to the continuous influx of different ideas and thoughts that come up in the mind of a waking person. And slowly it entered the realm of English literature, and now it denotes a technique in fiction writing where the person, the novelist, takes us straight away to the workings of the character's mind. Next question. Who called Shakespeare's Hamlet an artistic failure? Shakespeare, as we all know, was the greatest poet and dramatist. Actually, he is the greatest poet and playwright of all times, not just of the Elizabethan period, but for all times to come. At the same time, Hamlet, along with Macbeth, Othello and King Lear, is one of the best tragedies written by William Shakespeare. All the same, a great critic called this particular drama, Hamlet, an artistic failure. We have to name the critic who calls Shakespeare's Hamlet an artistic failure in one of his critiques. Critic is a person, whereas critique is an essay or a treatise or something. And the name of the critic is T.S. Eliot. It was Thomas Sterne Eliot who called Shakespeare's Hamlet an artistic failure. T.S. Eliot has written an essay called Hamlet and His Problems. In this essay, he calls Hamlet an artistic failure. Next question. Ralph Roister Doister, the first comedy in English, was written by. Before we go to the answer, let us understand that Ralph Roister Doister was the first comedy to have been written in the English language. And it was written by a high school headmaster. He had a small group of actors among his students, so he wanted to enact some kind of drama with the help of those students, and for this purpose he wrote the drama called Ralph Roister Doister. And incidentally, this was the first comedy to have been written in the English language. And the name of the playwright who composed this particular drama is Nicholas Udal. The credit for having written the first comic play in English literature, the first comedy in English literature, goes to a high school headmaster called Nicholas Udal. It was Nicholas Udal who wrote the first comic play in English literature titled Ralph Roister Doister. Next question. Who becomes the King of Scotland after the death of Macbeth? There is a fight between Macduff and Macbeth, and Macbeth tells Macduff that he is not going to be vanquished, he is not going to be killed until the Birnam Woods come to the Dunsinane Hills. Macbeth also tells Macduff that no one of a woman born can be capable of killing him, to which Macduff tells that he is not of a woman born but untimely ripped from the womb of his mother. Then, in the ensuing fight, Macbeth dies. After the death of Macbeth, Malcolm, the elder son of King Duncan, becomes the King of Scotland. The King Duncan has two sons, Malcolm and Donald Bain. Both of them run away, fearing for their lives. Later on, Macduff and Malcolm, they form a huge army. They come to the Inverness Castle and they cut the woods of Birnam Woods and they come uphill to Dunsinane Hills. After coming there, they kill Macbeth, and after the death of Macbeth, Malcolm becomes the King of Scotland. Next question here. Milton was a good poet but of the devil's party without knowing that. This is a statement, wonderful statement, and this was given by a very famous critic. We have to identify the critic. He was a critic as well as a poet. He belonged to the Romantic period. He has written very important pieces of poetry, and apart from poetry, he has written a good amount of criticism also. And this particular statement, wherein he says Milton was a good poet but of the devil's party without knowing that, we have to identify the poet and critic who said this particular thing about Milton. And it was Blake. Blake was a romantic. Wordsworth and Coleridge were known as the early romantics. Blake, Byron, Keats, Shelley, these people were known as the late romantics. And Blake has written a critique called Marriage of Heaven and Hell, in which he makes this particular statement. Our next question. Virtue Rewarded is the subtitle of the novel. See, many plays, poems, and novels have subtitles apart from their regular titles. Virtue Rewarded is the subtitle of a very important novel, and we have to identify the name of the novel whose subtitle was Virtue Rewarded. It's a novel by Samuel Richardson. It belonged to the genre called epistolary novel, and according to some people, it is the first novel to have been written in English literature. The name of the novel is Pamela. Pamela, a novel by Samuel Richardson, is subtitled Virtue Rewarded. And some people believe Pamela to be the first novel to have been written in English literature. Actually, Robinson Crusoe was the first novel in English, but some people give the credit to Pamela. Next question. Which English poet was known as the Lady of the Christ? Christ is the name of a wonderful college in London. And a particular English poet donned the role of a lady whenever there was some kind of drama in that particular college, as a result of which he got the nickname of Lady of the Christ. He is very famous. He has written quite a number of wonderful pieces of poetry. Paradise Lost, Paradise Regained, Samson Agonistes, Aeropagetico, Comus, El Allegro and Il Penseroso were all written by him. Hope you can identify him now. He was none other than John Milton. John Milton, while he was a student in the Christ College, got the nickname of Lady of the Christ. And he is also known as the English Virgil. Lady of the Christ and the English Virgil, both these refer to John Milton. So you have to have knowledge of all these things because they are going to be very important from different exams and interviews point of view. Next question. Essays by Eliya were written by... See, essays we know. Montaigne was the first person to introduce essay in French. The first person to write an essay was Montaigne. And Montaigne wrote the first essay in French. And the form was introduced into English literature by a great person called Francis Bacon. It was Francis Bacon who wrote the first essay in English literature. His essays are very popular even to this day. Bacon's essays are quite popular. Of studies and all other essays written by Francis Bacon are read even today. But here this question wants to know who wrote essays by Eliot, and the answer to this particular question is Charles Lamb. Charles Lamb was very famous essayist and he wrote under the pen name of Eliot. So you have to remember that essays by Eliot were written by Charles Lamb. Another important question that is regularly asked about Charles Lamb is regarding his book called Tales from Shakespeare. Shakespeare's dramas are very interesting, but at the same time difficult for children to understand. So Charles Lamb read all his dramas and he rewrote them as tales of Shakespeare for the benefit of children. Thanks for watching this particular video. In this video, it has been my effort to give you quite a few important questions and their answers on English literature, and in the process of doing so, I have given you a whole lot of information which can help you as hyperlink. So, you have to make use of all the tidbits of information that are given to you in this particular video